So we are here with James Urey, our senior account executive here at Close, and we are chatting today about sales models and methodologies, methods, models, whatever you want to call them. There's lots.
Yeah.
There's like so many. I recently discovered that there's
who
a
sat
lot.
down and wrote all these down.
That's what I was wondering about.
Yeah.
And it's interesting as well how many of them are like so similar, but they're all different and unique in their own ways. Just to kick us off here, what are some of the sales models or methodologies that you've learned in the past, maybe before you started here at Close? And was there anything that you found particularly valuable?
I completely agree with you. A lot of them have similarities, and I'll talk about why here in a minute, but there's a number of them. And you can trace these processes back to, who came up with them and why, of course. If you go back to some of the literature, some of the books that they wrote, you can see why they came up with these, but inherently they all are similar. However, I have used at my first sales job, they were big on being a challenger salesperson, which is one of the most popular. And I agree that I do align with elements of being a challenger salesperson. And what a challenger salesperson is, they teach, tailor, and take control is the premise of what a challenger salesperson is. And I 100% believe in teaching and tailoring. That is extremely important. Now, taking control, that's subjective of what that actually means. My thought on that, what that would mean and how I align with it is I'm going to take control of being an expert on what the person needs so that I can make strong recommendations for them. So I think of that as taking control. I'm never going to take the control away from them as like, you absolutely need this when you don't actually need it, right? It's always going to be, I think you do need this because you've expressed that this is a problem. This is how we can solve that problem. I strongly think that this is going to make an impact on your business. And so that's how I think of taking control in the challenger sales. So I do align with elements of being a challenger salesperson. I implement that on a pretty day-to-day basis. And it's also natural to who I am as a salesperson. It's teaching, it's tailoring, it's making strong recommendations. It's also built on building really strong relationships by being able to take that control. Now, snap selling is another one that I can align with. The premise there is to keep things simple and to keep the main problem top of mind, right? We don't want to overcomplicate things. People that you're typically selling to and the folks that are making decisions, they're busy. Taking on a new project is not something that they necessarily want to do, but they know they need to do it. So making it as simple as possible. Here's our problem. Here's what we need to solve. Here's how we're going to solve it. Don't dilute it with anything else. I deeply align with that. Not only in sales, but in life in general. Like, really just keep it very simple. Keep the most important things top of mind. And so the hybrid of those two are definitely how I sell. Now, you can go out and dive into all of these sales models. There are a number of them. There's I think it's like 15 that are sort of like the most popular, but you're going to see elements overlapping in all of them. And the overarching sort of pattern in all of these is, what problem are you solving? You have a product, you have a service that solves a problem. So what are you solving? And how can I help you solve that problem with our product or service? Right? You got to figure out the problem. You got to figure out the pain. You'll find that in elements of every single one of these processes. And then beyond that, if you can solve their problem, who needs to chime in on this decision? Who needs to give their input so that ultimately the person who can sign off and give the money, so that gives the green light based on everybody's feedback. Those are the two things that you really need to solve for in any sales process, whether it's outbound, whether it's inbound. You got to figure out those two things. Now, I think that you become very effective as a salesperson when you, of course, figure those things out, but then you introduce your own skill, your own style into the process. Some enterprise models, when they're scaling, they might just find one process that really aligns and they teach and train that and they replicate that because it works for them. I can't argue with that. But I do think it is good to give your salesperson the freedom to sell in the format that makes sense to them. Now, in any of these processes, I think that where the salesperson becomes effective is, one, building really powerful relationships, right? I mean, rapport, yes, it's cliche. We've talked about it a number of times, but it is so important to build powerful relationships. You need to be able to pull someone's guard down so that they will talk to you genuinely, authentically, and candidly, right? You need to get information from them, but you also need to be genuinely out to help them solve their problem. That is the most powerful skill or tool that a salesperson has. Pull down the buyer's guard and build a powerful relationship, build some rapport so you get them speaking honestly, and so that you have a direct line of communication on what's your problem? Can I solve it? If the answer is yes, great, this is how we'll solve it. If you can't solve their problem, again, tell them no. We've gone over this a couple of times, but tell them no if you can't solve their problem. And then figure out and understand the problem. If you can solve it, understand it deeply, understand it thoroughly, and then communicate in simple terms how you're going to solve it. On top of that, it's following up, right? People get busy. Not everybody closes the deal that day, that week, that month, maybe not even in 6 months. So it's important to follow up and follow through. It's okay if they're not ready to buy today. It's okay if they're not ready to buy this month. You need to follow up. I've had deals where I've closed where I followed up for an entire 12 months just because we were clear about that. Just put a note every month, followed up, followed up, followed up. And it's just a quick blurb like, are you ready to do this? Just reminding them of our conversation, not in a long email, just a very short, brief, hey, we chatted about this. It's 7 months has gone by now. Are you ready to do this? Follow up.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love because following up is definitely one of Stelly's main things. He's, I feel like, sort of the master of following up. So that kind of brings us to the next question then that I had about when you joined Close, looking back at that time, what did you learn about the sales model or process that the sales team was using here at Close? And what was your perception of that?
It was very freeing, to be honest. It was, can I help you? Can you help me? Follow up and follow through. It's pretty simple. You'll watch Stelly's talks and he'll talk about that all day long. And it's true. Can I help you solve a problem? Can you help me? Do you have money? Can you refer more business to me? And after that, it's following up and following through. Doing things that you told people you were going to do in the sales process, or following up because the timeline is not aligning. So in that sense, those three fundamental things of sales, and when I came to Close, when I was really the only salesperson, Nick sort of dropped me into the bucket and said, good luck. And that's what I did. I went out in this really, huge inbound funnel, and I figured that out. I figured out who I could help, who I couldn't help. I figured out how to say no. I figured out how to make other recommendations if it was a no. I figured out how, if it was a yes and I could help them, how I would help them. And I always followed through using resources on my team, my support team, my success team. I figured out how to follow through on solving a specific problem. And again, if timeline didn't align, I followed up.
Was there anything inside of Stelly's sales approach or his videos or anything that you learned along the way that really stood out to you, like, wow, I didn't think about that, or this is something new that I didn't try before, but it really works? Anything that kind of sticks out in your brain?
Yeah, I think it's the idea of when he says, can I help you? That's obvious, but can you help me? Is something that I hadn't thought a lot about, right? As a salesperson, you're like, can I help you? Can I win your business? Can I earn you as a customer? But it was, can you help me too? And that was something that was new to me. It didn't totally click for me out of the gate. And then I started to realize that as I had that freedom in the sales process, it's okay to ask if they have a budget. It's okay to ask if they can buy. It's okay to ask if they have friends that they can refer because they were a good fit and they might have a network of people. And so that took some practice and understanding. It seems simple in concept, but not a lot of sales organizations preach that. Can you help me? And so I think as a salesperson, it's smart to understand if you can help somebody, how can they help you too? But figuring out the prior first, can you help them? And then asking for that later. That was a very new concept that took some time to learn and practice. And now it's just a part of my nature as a salesperson to figure that out.
Yeah, I love that. And how did you go about learning this? Like, were you trained in this by Nick or Stelly, or did you just kind of figure it out?
I was aware that those were like the fundamental sales methodologies, and it was really trial by fire though, just implementing them and figuring that out, going into the system and realizing what Close was really good at, what it wasn't, and who's going to be in alignment with what we can do really, really well. And so it was a matter of, I understood this is how we sell. Here's the freedom to do it. Go out and do it. And then after that, I just figured it out. And those fundamentals are pretty natural. I felt this new sense of freedom to spread my wings and go out and use my natural skills based on those fundamentals. You're not in an organization where they're trying to make it work, figure it out. We got to meet our bottom line. We got to meet our numbers. You got to be able to hit quota regardless. If they're somewhat of a good fit, figure it out, pull them across the finish line. No, that's not what we do here at Close.
That's so interesting. So would you say that sales organizations could fall into the trap of just choosing one sales model and forcing all of the reps to use that same model? Do you think that is a negative thing maybe for a sales team?
It's subjective. It's really hard to say because in a really big organization, you can't just give your salespeople the freedom to do whatever they want. Like, here you go, jump in and figure it out. Like, it just doesn't work. You do have to have structure. You do have to have alignment with what you're trying to do. So I think there's absolutely a time and a place where this is our sales philosophy. This is how we implement it. This is how we train it. This is what you need to do. We've proven that this is effective. And once your rep is seniored and they've got it figured out, then maybe give them a little bit more freedom and flexibility. But I think as you're ramping people and you're this really big company where you're constantly hiring or you have a lot of turnover, you have to have some structure. So there's absolutely a time and a place. I think that when you're a smaller organization, you're a startup and you're just hiring your first sales reps, I think hiring really high quality human beings or really high quality salespeople and letting them figure it out and figure out what works within your funnel, I think that's totally okay. And I think that you're going to have a lot of success there. And then if you find this model that really works, then, maybe you do implement it and you do train on it. So there's a time and a place for giving everybody the freedom to be a cowboy salesperson or giving them a very structured step-by-step, here's how we sell and this is what works.
That makes sense. So then taking it down into the core group of people that you're talking to day in, day out with your work, bringing it down to our SaaS founders and our startup founders that are watching this. Mm-hmm. As we said in the beginning of this video, there are so many different sales models, methodologies, books, courses that tell you this is how you must do sales. How would you recommend to a SaaS founder, someone who's new to this whole sales game, how would you recommend deciding on a sales approach that works for them? Like, should it be inbound, outbound, consultative, spin, NEAT, whatever other acronym you can think of? Yeah. How do they find the right one for them?
So inbound is going to be, harder, expensive initially or take time. So naturally, most founders are going to have to do outbound sales, and that's just the nature of it. What I think, and I wouldn't so much say, how do I do sales? What's a sales philosophy that I align with? I don't think that's the first place that you should start with and be like, oh, I align with number 7. That one looks great. That's exactly who I am. I think the first question you need to start with is, why did I go out on my own to be an entrepreneur, to start a company? What problem am I solving, right? You set out to solve a problem. And if you took that life risk to start a company, you should be pretty passionate about the problem that you're solving. And so you need to go out and figure out, who did I solve this problem for? And how can I communicate to them how I actually have the ability to solve your problem? I believe that you might have this problem and I can solve it. And so at that point, you need to be able to communicate how you solve that problem in an effective way, but also make sure that the passion is embedded in your messaging and your outbound efforts. So I've solved a problem. Who can I solve it for? Now I need to go out and find those folks that I can solve the problem for. I think that is first and foremost, and making sure that that life risk that you took and the passion that you have for solving that problem is quite apparent in your messaging to those people. That is the first thing you need to do. You don't need to go and find some sales process that you align with. Once you are communicating the problem that you're solving, the rest is going to come pretty naturally. And now once folks are engaged, the important thing is, again, going back to, can I solve this problem for you? Yes. How can you help me if I can help you? And follow up. As a founder, leads are extremely valuable. If you have 5 leads in your pipeline that are engaged, those are golden. Never stop following up, but do that with grace, right? You don't want to ping them every day and say, ready to buy yet? You ready to buy yet? You got to do it with grace. You got to do it in a way that's not annoying, but hey, I'm still here. Let's continue the conversation. I know I can solve this problem. Or making sure that you've set a flag in the sand. Let's talk in 6 months so we can solve this problem. So following up, following through. Can I help you? Can you help me? What problem am I solving for a founder? And then once you get more robust and you are hiring salespeople, then perhaps take a look at those sales philosophies and figure out if there is one that you deeply align with.
That makes so much sense. Being passionate about the problem that you're solving. Because it's true, in most cases, then that startup founder knows their audience pretty well because probably they're solving a problem that they themselves have had.
Exactly. They do. They know their persona extremely well. They know exactly who they solved that problem for. I talked to a couple of gals yesterday and they were tech founders and they were like, we have no experience in sales. We really don't know what to do. And that's exactly what I told them. I said, you two started a business to solve a problem. Who are you solving it for? And they were able to identify the exact persona. This is exactly who we're solving it for. And I was thinking about a sales strategy that included Loom, but their persona, they were not going to know what Loom was. They were not going to click a link. It was only going to be straightforward direct messaging. We're talking about folks on the older scale who have a different business mind, who are solving a more specific problem that is in finance. Those folks are not going to be clicking a Loom link. And so we pivoted and adjusted our strategy on that call based on who their persona was. So yes, every founder has a good idea of who they've solved that problem for and how to message to them. So communicate with those folks that you've solved the problem for in a way that you know that they're going to comprehend, whether that is a brief email, whether that's a Loom video, whatever that is, a card in the mail. I don't know who your persona is, but there are different channels and strategies of communication that you need to be aware of for your persona. Do that. Don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate it. You know what to do. You're a founder. You started this company.
I love that. And it's actually a specific advantage that founders have. That's an advantage that they have over some big sales organizations that maybe the sales reps themselves don't have that kind of experience with the actual audience that they're selling to. The founder has that advantage. They know who they're talking to.
They believe in it. No matter if you're a tech founder or a sales founder, you should be the best salesperson in your company because you know that problem the best, you know the solution the best, and you know how to communicate why you solved it.
Awesome. That makes so much sense. Any other advice for sales models, methodologies for our SaaS founders or startup founders here?
Yeah, I would say do your research on them. Check them out. Like they exist for a reason. If you're a person who wants that structure and you want to create that documentation around your sales philosophies and the one you align with, definitely take a look. A lot of the books that I've read based on those sales methodologies are great. They're extremely beneficial. I take bits of value from each of them. So do research them, figure out one that you align with and see if it really hits home. And if it doesn't, stick with the core fundamentals of what sales is.
I like that because it's not just saying, okay, this particular whatever model is the one that you must do. Because I feel like a lot of these sales gurus will be like, you must do Challenger or you must do Spin or you must do solution selling, like whatever their preferred sales model is. But you can't pick one and say, this is right for everybody.
Agreed. Yeah, there's a time and place for all of those different processes. I get the value in every single one. I understand why people would align with one and implement it. It scales. It really does. But I'm a firm believer in sticking in the core fundamentals of sales. And I'm a firm believer in hiring really high quality salespeople that have a very high level of emotional intelligence, that know how to communicate with people, pull their guard down, and they know how to listen and understand a problem, and they know how to communicate in simple terms how to solve that problem. So I'm a huge believer in hiring high quality salespeople versus aligning with the sales process. That being said, I've never worked in a company where we have a sales team of 250 sales reps and we've got to figure out a process that scales. So I understand why some folks point to one and implement.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Thanks.